My name is Marcus, 28 years old. The message from my father glowed on my phone screen like a dagger. We no longer trust you. 3 years of building our family business together, shattered in 7 words. I only replied with one, understood. Not arguing. Not pleading. Sometimes the strongest response is silence. What I never expected was how my calculated restraint would upend the power dynamic in my wealthy family forever. The text that was meant to break me became my unexpected salvation. I had always been the financial brain of our family business. After graduating with my MBA, I joined Steinberg Enterprises, the manufacturing empire my grandfather started and my parents expanded. For years I worked tirelessly alongside my father, Robert, and my older sister, Sarah, learning every aspect of the business. Our family dynamic was complicated but functional. Mom passed away 4 years ago, leaving Dad as the majority shareholder and Sarah as the public face of the company. I handled the numbers, investments, and long-term strategy. We made a good team, or so I thought. Marcus, these projections are incredible, Dad had said just 6 months ago, reviewing my quarterly report. Your mother would be proud. Those words meant everything to me. Growing up, I had always been the quiet, analytical son, while Sarah inherited Mom's charisma and commanding presence. Finding my place in the family business gave me purpose and, finally, it seemed, my father's approval. The problems began when I proposed our company's first major venture into sustainable manufacturing. Traditional industrial production was our bread and butter, but I saw the future in green technology and eco-friendly processes. It's too far outside our expertise, Sarah argued during our strategy meeting. We're talking about a $80 million investment in a sector we know nothing about. That's why I've spent the last year researching it, I countered. I've consulted with the top minds in the industry. The potential ROI is double what we're seeing in our current portfolio. Dad sat silently at the head of the conference table, his eyes darting between his children. Let's table this for now, he finally said. Marcus, prepare a more detailed proposal for next month's board meeting. I knew that tone. He was leaning toward Sarah's side, but giving me a chance to change his mind. I threw myself into the research, working late nights and weekends. Elena, my girlfriend of 2 years, noticed the change. You're obsessing, she said one night as I pored over market analyses in our apartment. As a tech entrepreneur herself, she understood ambition, but even she was concerned. This isn't just about the business, I admitted. It's about proving myself. To who? She asked. Your dad, Sarah, or yourself? I couldn't answer. Maybe all three. The tension reached a breaking point during a family dinner at Dad's estate. Sarah brought along her husband, Michael, and their perfect children, while Elena and I arrived late due to my last-minute preparation for the upcoming board meeting. Sorry we're late, I apologized as we sat down. Final touches on the green tech proposal. Dad sighed. Can we have one dinner without business talk? Of course, I agreed, but Sarah wasn't letting it go. Actually, I wanted to discuss something, she said, setting down her wine glass. I've been hearing concerns from some of our investors about potential new directions for the company. I knew exactly what she was doing. Really? Which investors? The Kowalskis, for one. They're worried about unnecessary risks. The Kowalskis were old family friends and had been investors since my grandfather's time. They also happened to be Sarah's in-laws. Did you tell them about my proposal? I asked, feeling heat rise in my face. That was confidential board material. They're major stakeholders, Sarah said smoothly. They have a right to know where their money might be going. Dad interjected. Sarah, Marcus has a point about confidentiality. But Marcus, she also has valid concerns about risk. The rest of dinner was tense. Elena squeezed my hand under the table, a silent show of support. Later that night she offered perspective. Your sister feels threatened by you. This isn't about the proposal anymore. It never was. I realized it's about control, I said. What I didn't know then was just how far Sarah would go to maintain that control, or how a single text message would soon change everything. What Elena didn't know, what no one knew, was that I had already begun taking action. 6 months earlier, I had invested $1.5 million of my personal funds into EcoFlow Solutions, a promising startup developing revolutionary energy-efficient manufacturing processes. It wasn't just speculation. I had done exhaustive research and even consulted anonymously with industry experts. The company was poised to transform how sustainable manufacturing operated. My investment was completely separate from family business funds. I used money I had inherited directly from my grandmother, plus my own savings. Still, I kept it quiet, knowing how my family might perceive any independent financial moves. In our household, loyalty was measured by transparency. 3 weeks after the tense family dinner, Sarah stormed into my office waving her phone. "What the hell is this?" she demanded, showing me a screenshot of an investment document. My heart sank. Somehow she had discovered my personal investment. "That's my private investment portfolio," I said calmly. "Completely separate from company business." "Don't play dumb," Sarah spat. "You're positioning yourself to direct our family's company toward these green technologies so your side investment will skyrocket." "That's ridiculous," I replied, standing up. "The investment decision would make sense for Steinberg regardless of my personal holdings. And there's no conflict of interest, legally speaking." "Dad needs to hear about this," Sarah said, already dialing his number. Within an hour we were assembled in the main conference room. Dad sat rigidly at the head of the table, with our company's longtime CFO, Harold, and our legal counsel, Jennifer, flanking him. Sarah had brought printed copies of my investment documents. God knows how she got them. $1.5 million into a company that directly benefits from the exact type of manufacturing pivot you've been pushing, Dad said, his voice unnervingly quiet. "How is that not a conflict of interest?" "I invested my personal funds in a promising company because I believe in the technology," I explained. "Yes, it's in the same sector I think our company should explore. But that's because I genuinely believe that's where the future lies. I didn't hide it because it was wrong. I kept it separate because it is separate." Jennifer, our legal counsel, cleared her throat. "Technically, as long as he disclosed the potential conflict before any company decisions were made, there's no legal issue." "This isn't about legality," Dad replied sharply. "It's about trust." Sarah pounced. "He's been pushing us toward a business direction that secretly benefits him. He's using family resources for personal gain." "That's not true," I protested. "The company stands to gain far more than I ever would from my small investment." Harold, who had been quietly reviewing the documents, spoke up. "The projected returns for Steinberg would indeed be substantial if the green tech venture succeeds. Marcus's personal investment, while potentially profitable, is proportionally much smaller." But Sarah wasn't backing down. "It's the principle. He's supposed to be making unbiased recommendations for our family business, not ones that line his own pockets. I would have disclosed the investment before any final decisions," I insisted. "I was going to include it in next week's presentation." Dad's expression remained impassive. Convenient timing. The meeting continued for another hour, growing increasingly hostile. Sarah brought up other instances where she claimed I had acted suspiciously, most of them completely fabricated or twisted beyond recognition. I realized with growing horror that this wasn't a spontaneous accusation. She had been building a case against me. "Remember when the Henderson contract mysteriously fell through after Marcus handled the negotiations?" Sarah said. "Or how about the strange discrepancies in the Peterson account that only Marcus managed?" These were outright lies. The Henderson deal collapsed because of regulatory issues completely beyond my control, and there had never been any discrepancies in the Peterson account. But Dad was nodding along, as if these false accusations confirmed something he had long suspected. When the meeting finally ended, I felt completely blindsided. My father wouldn't meet my eyes, and Sarah wore a satisfied smirk as I gathered my things to leave. Dad finally spoke directly to me. "We'll need time to consider the implications of all this," he said coldly. "Until then, perhaps you should work from home." I left the office in a daze, my mind racing to understand how things had spiraled so quickly. When I called Elena to explain what happened, she was furious on my behalf. "They're punishing you for being forward-thinking," she said. "And Sarah is clearly manipulating the situation." "The worst part is that Dad believes her," I replied, the hurt evident in my voice. 15 years of loyalty, and he thinks I would betray the family. What I didn't realize then was that the worst was yet to come. 2 days later, a courier delivered an envelope to my apartment. Inside was a formal letter on company letterhead stating that I was temporarily relieved of my duties at Steinberg Enterprises, effective immediately. My access cards, company credit cards, and login credentials were to be surrendered. The letter was signed by my father. No phone call, no conversation, just a cold, impersonal letter. I called Dad's cell phone, then his home number. No answer. I tried Sarah, who predictably sent me to voicemail. When I attempted to log into the company system from my laptop, I discovered my credentials had already been deactivated. "They're isolating you," Elena observed as I paced our apartment. Classic power move. She was right. The Steinbergs had a long tradition of closing ranks when they felt threatened. I'd seen it happen with former business partners who fell out of favor, but I never imagined I would be on the receiving end. That evening my phone buzzed with a text from my cousin, David. "Heard you got caught embezzling company funds, WTF man." My blood ran cold. I called him immediately. "Who told you that?" I demanded. "It's going around the family," David replied. "Sarah told Aunt Linda you were making secret investments with company money. Is it true?" "Absolutely not," I said firmly. "I made a personal investment with my own money. There was no embezzlement." But the damage was done. By morning I had received similar messages from 3 other relatives and 2 childhood friends whose families had investments in Steinberg Enterprises. Sarah was systematically destroying my reputation. That afternoon I received the text that would change everything. From Dad, "We no longer trust you." 7 words that cut deeper than any knife. Years of loyalty, of working weekends and holidays, of putting the family business above everything else in my life, all dismissed in a single text message. I stared at my phone for a long time, emotions warring within me. Anger, hurt, betrayal, but mostly a cold clarity began to emerge. Fighting back emotionally would only play into their hands. So I typed the only response that made sense: "Understood." Elena found me sitting motionless on our balcony an hour later, still staring at that exchange. "That's it?" she asked, reading over my shoulder. "Just understood? What else is there to say?" I replied. "They've made up their minds without giving me a fair hearing. Arguing won't change that." She sat beside me, taking my hand. "So what now?" That was the question, wasn't it? I had been effectively cut off from the company that had been the center of my life. My reputation was being systematically dismantled by my own sister. My father wouldn't even speak to me. "I need to talk to Harold," I decided. Harold Morrison had been our company's CFO for 18 years. He was my mother's best friend and had always been fair to both Sarah and me. If anyone might give me an honest assessment of the situation, it would be him. Getting to Harold proved challenging. He wouldn't take my calls either, but I knew his habits. Every Thursday evening he played chess at the community center with a group of retired businessmen. It was a ritual he never missed. That Thursday I waited on a nearby bench until his game finished, then approached as he was packing up his pieces. 5 minutes, I said. "That's all I'm asking." Harold glanced around nervously, then nodded. "Walk with me." As we strolled through the parking lot, I explained my side of the story. Harold listened without interrupting, his expression giving nothing away. "I believe you," he finally said. "But it doesn't matter what I believe. Sarah has convinced your father that you were planning some kind of corporate takeover using this green investment as leverage." "That's insane," I protested. "Why would Dad even think that's possible?" Harold sighed heavily. "Because Sarah showed him documents suggesting you've been secretly meeting with board members, trying to sway them to your side." "What documents?" "That never happened." "Fabricated emails from what I could tell," Harold admitted. "But very convincing ones. And there's more. Sarah is pushing to have you removed from the board entirely and your shares transferred to a trust controlled by your father." My head spun. This was worse than I thought. Sarah wasn't just pushing me out temporarily. She was trying to permanently remove me from the company our grandfather built. "What should I do?" I asked. "Fight back publicly? Get a lawyer?" Harold stopped walking and faced me directly. "Right now you can't win. Sarah has your father's ear and the board is following his lead. If you fight, you'll just reinforce their perception that you're a threat. So I just give up?" The very idea was anathema to me. "No," Harold said thoughtfully. "You retreat strategically. Sometimes the best move isn't to fight the current, but to step out of the river entirely and wait for the waters to calm." It was the wisdom I needed, painful as it was to hear. That night I made a decision that went against every instinct I had. I would not fight back. Not yet. I would step back completely, focus on my investment in EcoFlow Solutions, and wait. Elena was skeptical but supportive. "If that's what you think is best, I'm with you. But don't let them get away with this forever." "I won't," I promised. "This isn't surrender. It's a strategic retreat." I drafted a brief formal email to the board of directors stating that I would take a voluntary leave of absence for 3 months to address personal matters. No accusations, no defenses, nothing that could be used against me. Just a dignified step back. Then I shut off all social media, changed my phone number, and prepared for the hardest thing I'd ever done, walking away from the fight when everything in me wanted to stand my ground. The next morning, Elena left for a 2-week business trip to Seattle. I promised to keep her updated, but as I watched her leave, I felt completely alone. Cut off from my family, isolated from the company that had been my identity, I faced an uncertain future with only my wits and patience to guide me. What I didn't know then was that my investment in EcoFlow Solutions was about to pay off in ways I could never have imagined, and that my simple one-word response to my father's text would soon prove to be the most powerful move I could have made. 6 weeks into my self-imposed exile, everything changed. I was having coffee with Elena, who had just returned from another business trip, when my phone lit up with a news alert. The headline made me choke on my espresso: green tech startup EcoFlow Solutions lands massive government contract worth $900 million. Elena grabbed my phone. "Isn't that your?" "Yes," I whispered, rapidly scrolling through the article. EcoFlow Solutions had just landed a massive federal contract to retrofit manufacturing facilities across multiple government agencies. Their proprietary technology had beaten out offerings from much larger established companies. My $1.5 million investment was now worth approximately $25 million, practically overnight. More news followed in rapid succession. Major manufacturers were scrambling to implement EcoFlow systems in their own facilities. The company's stock price tripled in a week, then doubled again. Financial analysts were calling it the sustainability breakthrough of the decade. But that wasn't all. A second news alert caught my attention: Titan Industries making aggressive moves to acquire regional manufacturers. Titan Industries was one of the largest industrial conglomerates in the country, known for their cutthroat acquisition tactics. According to the article, they were specifically targeting family-owned manufacturers with strong portfolios in areas primed for green conversion. Steinberg Enterprises would be squarely in their sights. I immediately called Harold, who answered on the first ring. "I assume you've seen the news," he said without preamble. "Both stories," I confirmed. "How vulnerable is Steinberg?" Harold lowered his voice. "Very. Sarah overextended on 3 major developments last quarter, trying to prove she could grow the company without you. They're all underperforming. Cash reserves are low, and Titan knows this. They know everything." "They know everything," Harold confirmed grimly. "Their representatives are meeting with your father and Sarah tomorrow." This was the moment when I could have sat back and watched my family's company get devoured by corporate sharks. Part of me wanted to let Sarah face the consequences of her actions. Let Dad see what his blind trust in her had wrought. But Steinberg Enterprises wasn't just Sarah's legacy or my father's company. It was my grandfather's dream, my mother's life's work. Despite everything, I couldn't let it fall. "What's their leverage?" I asked. "The Riverside Facility project," Harold replied. "Sarah signed off on cutting corners to save costs. There are safety issues that haven't been made public. Titan somehow got hold of the internal reports." I cursed under my breath. The Riverside facility was our largest current project, a state-of-the-art manufacturing plant. If those safety issues became public, not only would the project be delayed indefinitely, but our company's reputation would be irreparably damaged. "Dad and Sarah can't handle this alone," I said. "They don't understand the green tech angle and they won't recognize the opportunities hidden in a deal with Titan." Harold was silent for a moment. "They won't listen to you. Now they might not have a choice," I replied. "I need you to do something for me, Harold. Don't tell them we spoke, but make sure they understand exactly how bad this could get." The next day I received a surprising phone call from Jennifer Walsh, our company's legal counsel. Her voice was tense. "Marcus, this is extremely unorthodox, but we need certain information that only you have access to." "Regarding?" I kept my tone neutral. "The contingency plans for the Riverside facility and the backup documentation for the Northside property zoning applications. These were precisely the 2 areas where Sarah would be most vulnerable in negotiations with Titan. I had created comprehensive contingency plans for Riverside, including remediation strategies for any potential safety issues, and the Northside property documentation contained clauses I had specifically designed to prevent hostile takeovers of that particularly valuable asset. "I'm no longer with the company," I reminded her, as I was rather unceremoniously informed. Jennifer sighed. "This is bigger than personal grievances. Titan is making a move that could essentially dismantle everything your family has built." "I'm aware," I said coolly. "And yet no one from my family has reached out to me directly." There was a pause. What would it take? I had prepared for this question. A face-to-face meeting. Me, Dad, Sarah, you, and Harold. No accusations, no rehashing the past. Just a strategic discussion about Titan. "I'll see what I can do," Jennifer promised. 3 hours later my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number: "Conference room C, 7 p.m. tonight. Come through the service entrance." It was happening. I spent the afternoon reviewing everything I knew about Titan Industries, their acquisition history, and their likely strategies. I also transferred a portion of my EcoFlow windfall to a separate account, just in case. Being prepared wasn't paranoia, it was strategy. At 6:55 p.m. I entered the familiar Steinberg building through the service entrance for the first time in my life. The security guard, who had known me for years, pretended not to recognize me. I was escorted up the back elevator like a stranger. When I walked into conference room C, the tension was palpable. Dad sat rigidly at the head of the table, Sarah beside him, Harold and Jennifer occupied the other side. No one stood to greet me. "Thank you for coming," Jennifer said formally, as if I were an outside consultant rather than family. "Let's be clear about why we're here," Sarah interjected. "We need specific information. This doesn't change anything about the company situation." I remained standing, briefcase in hand. "Before we begin, I need to confirm something. Titan has the Riverside safety reports, correct? And they're using them as leverage." Dad's sharp intake of breath confirmed it. "They're demanding a controlling interest in the company at 50 cents on the dollar," Harold stated flatly. "With the safety issues as leverage, they can force a sale at distressed prices," I continued. "And if those issues become public, our stock will tank anyway." Making their offer the only lifeline, I concluded grimly. "We don't need you to explain our situation to us," Sarah snapped. "We need the contingency documentation you apparently kept to yourself." I set my briefcase on the table but didn't open it. I didn't keep it to myself. It's all in the secure server, exactly where it's supposed to be. The fact that none of you could find it speaks volumes. "Marcus," Dad spoke for the first time, his voice strained. "Please." That single word held so much. Pride struggling with necessity. Anger tempered by fear. And, underneath it all, a father's plea to a son. I opened my briefcase and removed a thumb drive. "Everything you need is here. Contingency plans, remediation strategies, cost analyses, timeline adjustments. I prepared all of this months ago as a standard risk management protocol." Sarah reached for the drive, but I held it back. "There's one more thing you should know. Titan isn't just after Steinberg because we might be vulnerable. They want our facilities specifically because of their potential for green conversion." I pulled out my tablet and brought up a map of our facility holdings, overlaid with sustainability requirements and green tech growth projections. It was the same presentation I had been preparing before everything fell apart, now updated with current market data. "The very pivot I was advocating for is exactly what makes our portfolio valuable to Titan," I explained. "They see what I saw 6 months ago. These facilities are ideally positioned for the coming wave of sustainable manufacturing needs." For the next hour, I laid out exactly why Titan wanted our company and how we could use that knowledge to turn the tables. I explained how EcoFlow's technology would be essential for any serious green manufacturing development, and how our facilities could command premium prices if properly positioned. "Wait," Sarah interrupted. "How do you know so much about this security company?" I met her gaze steadily. "Because I invested in them. With my own money, which is exactly what I told you 6 weeks ago, before you accused me of embezzlement and turned our father against me." The room fell silent. Harold cleared his throat uncomfortably. "There's something else you should know," he said, looking at my father rather than me. "I took the liberty of investigating some of the concerns that were raised about Marcus's actions." He placed a folder on the table. The emails suggesting Marcus was conspiring with board members were fabricated, as were the discrepancies in the accounts he managed. "I have the forensic evidence here." Dad turned to Sarah, his expression unreadable. "Did you know about this?" Sarah's face flushed. "I might have been given incorrect information." "You didn't get incorrect information," I said quietly. "You created it because you saw me as a threat to your control." For a moment I thought Sarah might deny it. Instead, she slumped slightly in her chair. "You were pushing changes that would have undermined everything Mom built." "I was pushing changes that would have saved it," I corrected her. "The same changes Titan now wants to implement themselves after buying us at a discount." The reality of the situation was finally sinking in. My father's hands trembled slightly as he reached for the folder Harold had provided. "We need to focus on the immediate problem," Jennifer interjected pragmatically. "Titan representatives will be here at 9 a.m. tomorrow. What's our strategy?" All eyes turned to me. The prodigal son, unceremoniously cast out, now their only hope of salvation. It would have been satisfying if it weren't so painful. "I have a counter-strategy," I said, "but its success depends on all of us presenting a united front and on whether you're willing to embrace the green tech pivot I originally proposed." Dad looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. "Tell us what you have in mind." As I outlined my plan, I could see the shifting dynamics in the room. Fear gave way to cautious hope. Antagonism yielded to grudging respect. And somewhere beneath it all, the first fragile seedlings of renewed trust began to take root. What no one but Elena knew was that I had already been contacted by Titan's competitors, who were very interested in partnership possibilities with Steinberg, especially given my connections to EcoFlow Solutions. I had options that my family didn't know about. I could have walked away, started fresh with my new fortune, and left them to face the consequences of their actions. But that night I chose family despite everything. Not because they deserved it, but because some bonds run deeper than betrayal. As the meeting concluded, my father held back while the others filed out. When we were alone, he looked at me with eyes that held a storm of emotions. "We should talk," he said simply. Yes, I agreed. We should. What neither of us could have anticipated was the phone call that would come the very next morning, throwing yet another unexpected twist into our family drama. At 6:30 a.m., my phone rang, jolting me from a restless sleep. The number was unfamiliar. "Marcus Steinberg," I answered groggily. "Marcus, it's Tom Blackwood." The voice of our family's longtime lawyer was unmistakable, even though we hadn't spoken in weeks. His tone sent me immediately alert. Tom was known for his unflappable demeanor. I had never heard him sound anxious before. "I need to see you immediately," he continued. "Not at the office. Can you meet me at Riverside Cafe in 20 minutes? What's happened?" "Not over the phone," he insisted. I threw on clothes and raced to the coffee shop, my mind spinning with possibilities. Had Titan made an overnight move? Was there new evidence of Sarah's deception? Had my father changed his mind about working with me? Tom was already waiting at a corner table, a manila envelope and 2 coffee cups before him. His normally immaculate appearance was slightly disheveled, his tie askew. "Titan isn't just coming for a negotiation today," he said without preamble as I sat down. "They're planning a hostile takeover. They've secretly acquired options on enough of your outstanding shares to potentially force the issue." "How is that possible?" I demanded. 65% of shares are held by family members. 63%, Tom corrected, and several of your cousins and your Uncle Philip have apparently been approached with extremely generous offers for their voting rights. I cursed under my breath. Uncle Philip had been trying to liquidate his share of the family business for years to fund his art collecting habit. That's still not enough for a controlling interest, I pointed out. Tom slid the envelope across the table. They don't need a controlling interest if they can prove corporate malfeasance. These are the documents they're prepared to file with the SEC this afternoon if your father doesn't agree to their terms. Inside the envelope were detailed reports of the Riverside facility safety issues, along with internal memos discussing the decision to proceed despite safety concerns. Sarah's signature was on every approval. This would trigger an automatic regulatory investigation, Tom explained unnecessarily. Your stock would plummet, contracts would be frozen. By the time the dust settled, even if no charges were ultimately filed, the company would be severely devalued and Titan swoops in to save us, I concluded grimly. Precisely. I studied the documents more carefully. Some of these memos aren't in our normal format. And this approval form is missing the standard legal disclaimer footer. Tom nodded. I noticed that too. I think some of these may be altered or fabricated, like the evidence against you was, but it would take weeks to prove that. And by then, the damage would be done, I finished. The investigation alone would tank us. There's more, Tom said, lowering his voice further. The backup servers that would contain the original versions of these documents were compromised last night. The timing can't be coincidental. Now I understood his panic. Without those backups, proving tampering would be nearly impossible. But we maintain offline archives, I said. Mom always insisted on it. Paper backups of all major approvals stored in the basement vault. Tom stared at me. The archive room was water damaged 2 weeks ago. A pipe burst directly above it, supposedly by accident. Convenient, I muttered. This was more sophisticated than I had expected from Titan. They weren't just opportunistic, they were methodical. But they made one mistake. I have my own copies, I said. During my time as financial manager, I had maintained personal backups of all major project documentation. It was a habit my mother had instilled in me, a precaution against exactly this type of situation. The external hard drive was in my home safe, untouched since my departure from the company. If we can prove document tampering, we can counter their threat, I said. But we need more leverage. I pulled out my phone and made a call to Patricia Chen, the CEO of EcoFlow Solutions. Patricia, it's Marcus. Remember that integration possibility we discussed? I need to fast-track it today. After a brief conversation, I hung up and turned back to Tom. We're going to need the original construction plans for all our facilities from the last 5 years, and I need you to contact Sterling Capital immediately. Sterling Capital was a manufacturing investment trust with significant holdings in the green tech sector. They had approached me informally months ago about potential collaborations, interested in my ideas about sustainable conversion of traditional facilities. What exactly are you planning? Tom asked. Titan thinks they're the only player in this game, I replied. I'm going to show them they're wrong. I spent the next hour outlining my strategy to Tom. By the time we finished, his panic had been replaced by cautious optimism. This could actually work, he admitted. But you'll need your father and Sarah to follow your lead without question. I'll handle my family, I assured him with more confidence than I felt. You focus on getting those legal counters ready. At 8:30 a.m., 30 minutes before the Titan meeting was scheduled to begin, I walked into the Steinberg building through the front door this time. The receptionist's eyes widened in surprise. Mr. Steinberg, we weren't expecting you until 9. Plans changed, Lisa, I said smoothly. Please let my father know I need to see him and Sarah immediately. Dad and Sarah were in his office reviewing documents with Harold. All three looked up in surprise as I entered without knocking. We have a serious problem, I announced, dropping Tom's envelope on the desk. And we have exactly 29 minutes to solve it. I quickly outlined what Tom had discovered and my proposed counter-strategy. Sarah's face paled as she saw the documents with her signature. These are fake, she protested. I never approved bypassing those safety protocols. I believe you, I said, surprising her. But proving that will take time we don't have. My father studied me carefully. What do you need from us? Complete authority to lead the negotiation, I replied. No interruptions, no contradictions, no matter what I say or offer. Sarah started to object, but Dad silenced her with a look. And, he prompted. And an immediate board vote on my original green tech conversion proposal, contingent on us maintaining control of the company. Sarah looked like she might explode but kept her mouth shut as our father considered my terms. The room was silent except for the ticking of the antique clock on the wall. Agreed, he finally said. But I will be watching very closely, Marcus. At precisely 9 a.m. we assembled in the main conference room. The Titan team, led by their shark of a CEO, Victoria Reynolds, arrived with the confidence of predators who smelled blood in the water. Mr. Steinberg, Reynolds greeted my father with practiced charm. Thank you for meeting with us again. I trust you've had time to consider our offer. Actually, I spoke up, stepping forward, he's asked me to lead today's discussion. Reynolds couldn't quite hide her surprise. Mr. Steinberg, I was under the impression you were no longer with the company. Family businesses are complicated, I replied with a thin smile. Shall we begin? For the next hour I led what could only be described as a masterclass in corporate negotiation. I acknowledged Titan's leverage with the Riverside documentation, then systematically dismantled it by producing my own backup copies showing the originals had indeed been tampered with. Corporate espionage is a serious federal offense, I noted casually. As is evidence tampering. Reynolds maintained her poker face, but her legal counsel looked distinctly uncomfortable. Then I moved to phase 2, revealing the partnership agreement I had just secured with EcoFlow Solutions to implement their cutting-edge systems across all Steinberg facilities, dramatically increasing their value for green manufacturing tenants. The sustainability infrastructure alone adds a 25% premium to standard lease rates, I explained, sliding across the proprietary market analysis. And we have exclusivity in 3 key markets. Reynolds's eyes narrowed as she recognized the shifting dynamics, but I wasn't finished. And finally, there's this, I said, presenting the preliminary agreement with Sterling Capital. A joint venture that gives us access to their capital for expansion while maintaining our controlling interest. By now, the atmosphere in the room had transformed completely. The predators had become the prey. So, I concluded pleasantly, we're certainly open to strategic partnerships with Titan, but it would need to be on substantially different terms than you've proposed. Reynolds studied me for a long moment, then glanced at my father and Sarah, who had maintained perfect poker faces throughout. I see the Steinberg family is full of surprises, she finally said. Perhaps we should adjourn to reconsider our approach. Of course, I agreed. We'll expect your revised proposal by the end of the week. As the Titan team filed out, the tension in the room shifted. My father let out a long breath. Sarah stared at me with a complex mixture of resentment and reluctant admiration. That won't be the end of it, Harold cautioned once we were alone. They'll regroup and try another angle. Let them, I replied. We'll be ready. My father stood and approached me, his expression solemn. You saved us today. But that doesn't erase what happened. No, I agreed. It doesn't. Sarah shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Those documents they looked so real. I never signed off on bypassing safety protocols. I turned to face my sister directly. Just like I never conspired to take over the company. Someone went to a lot of trouble to pit this family against itself. The implication hung heavy in the air. Either someone at Titan had masterminded both deceptions, or there was another player we hadn't identified. We need to talk, Dad said again, echoing his words from the previous night. All of us. But not here. He suggested dinner at his house that evening. As I left the office, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Vindication, yes, but also lingering hurt and weariness. Trust, once broken, isn't easily restored. Elena was waiting at my apartment, eager to hear what had happened. You outmaneuvered them, she said with satisfaction after I recounted the meeting. But the bigger question remains, can you trust your family again? Or, more importantly, should I? I finished her thought. That was the question I carried with me as I drove to my childhood home that evening, prepared for the most difficult family dinner of my life. The family estate where I grew up looked exactly the same as it always had: colonial architecture, perfectly manicured lawns, the massive oak tree where Sarah and I had built a treehouse as children. But as I parked my car in the circular driveway, it felt different, foreign almost. Maria, the housekeeper who had known me since I was born, answered the door with a warm smile that faded when she saw my expression. They're in the sunroom, she said, squeezing my arm sympathetically. I found my father and Sarah waiting in awkward silence. A bottle of Mom's favorite wine sat open on the side table, 3 glasses already poured. Marcus, Dad acknowledged me with a nod. Thank you for coming. I took the offered glass but remained standing. I think we have a lot to discuss. Yes, he agreed. Starting with an apology. I should have given you the chance to explain yourself before jumping to conclusions. It was more than I had expected, but still fell short of the full reckoning we needed. Why didn't you? I asked directly. 15 years of loyalty, and you believed the worst of me without a second thought. Dad flinched slightly at my tone but didn't dodge the question. Because Sarah had been warning me for months that you were becoming too independent, making decisions without consultation. When she showed me those emails. Fabricated emails, I reminded him. I know that now, he acknowledged. But they played into fears I already had. What fears? I pressed. She took a long sip of her wine before answering. That you were pulling away from the family, that you had your own agenda. My agenda was modernizing our business to keep it competitive, I replied. Something that today's events proved was necessary. Sarah finally spoke up. It wasn't just business concerns, Marcus. You've been different since Mom died. More distant, less involved in family matters. I turned to my sister, really looking at her for the first time since I'd arrived. The confident facade had cracked, revealing something I rarely saw in Sarah: vulnerability. I threw myself into work after Mom died, I admitted. It was how I coped. But I never stopped caring about this family or our legacy. Yet you made that investment without telling anyone, Sarah pointed out. You were preparing your own parachute. I made a personal investment with my own money, I corrected her. And yes, I kept it separate because I knew how it might be perceived. That was a mistake, but not the one you accused me of. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. So many unspoken tensions, so many years of competition and misunderstanding between siblings. Dad cleared his throat. What matters now is where we go from here. Titan will be back with a new strategy. We need to be united. United requires trust, I said. And trust requires honesty. So let's be honest with each other, finally. I set my glass down and faced Sarah directly. Did you fabricate those emails yourself, or did someone help you? Sarah's face flushed. For a moment I thought she might lie again. Then her shoulders sagged. I didn't fabricate anything, she said quietly. But I didn't verify them either. They came from Reynolds at Titan, though I didn't know that at the time. She approached me personally, said she had concerns about some irregular patterns in our financial activities. This revelation stunned both me and our father. Victoria Reynolds approached you? Dad asked sharply. About 3 months ago, Sarah admitted. She presented herself as a potential ally, concerned about market stability. The emails came later, presented as information from industry sources. The pieces finally fell into place. Titan had been playing a long game, deliberately driving a wedge between us to weaken the company from within before making their move. They manipulated all of us, I realized aloud. And we played right into their hands. Dad set his glass down with a decisive click. Not anymore. What followed was the most honest conversation our family had had in years. Sarah admitted her long-standing insecurity about my business acumen, her fear that I would eventually replace her as the company's leader. Dad acknowledged his tendency to avoid conflict by deferring decisions. And I confessed my frustration at not being fully trusted with strategic direction, despite my proven track record. 3 hours and most of the wine bottle later, we had reached a tentative understanding. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a clear path forward. We need to restructure the company leadership, Dad proposed. More clearly defined roles, proper checks and balances, but also more autonomy within those roles. And we need to go forward with the green conversion strategy, I added. Starting with the implementation of EcoFlow systems across our facilities. Sarah nodded slowly. And we need to deal with Titan permanently. The next morning we presented a united front at an emergency board meeting. With Harold's financial analysis backing us up, we outlined a comprehensive plan. I would return as Chief Innovation Officer with full authority over the Green Conversion Initiative. Sarah would remain CEO, but with new oversight provisions. And Dad would step back from daily operations to serve as board chair. And what about the Titan situation? Asked Uncle Robert, our most conservative board member. We have evidence of corporate espionage and document tampering, I explained. Our legal team is preparing action if necessary. But more importantly, we're moving forward with the Sterling partnership immediately, which secures our position. The board unanimously approved our plan. As the meeting concluded, I felt a weight lifting. Not completely, but substantially. The road to rebuilding trust would be long, but we had taken the first crucial steps. That afternoon I met with the EcoFlow team to fast-track the implementation across our facilities. Patricia Chen, their CEO, was enthusiastic about the partnership. Your vision for sustainable manufacturing aligns perfectly with our efficiency infrastructure, she told me. This could revolutionize how companies approach industrial space. As I left the meeting, I found Sarah waiting by my car. I have something for you, she said, handing me a small flash drive. It's everything Reynolds sent me. Tom thinks it could be useful evidence if Titan tries anything else. I pocketed the drive. Thanks. We stood awkwardly for a moment, two siblings with too much history and too many unspoken words between us. I was wrong, Sarah finally said. About you, about your investment, about everything. I let my own insecurities cloud my judgment. Yes, you did, I agreed, not making it easy for her. Can we move past this? She asked. For the company, if nothing else. I considered her question carefully. The company needs both of us working together instead of against each other. So yes, professionally, we move forward. The personal trust, that will take time. Sarah nodded, accepting this partial reconciliation. Fair enough. 2 weeks later, Titan formally withdrew their acquisition interest. Our stock price had steadily climbed as news of the EcoFlow partnership spread through the industry. The Riverside facility safety issues were addressed with a transparent remediation plan that actually enhanced the property's future green adaptability. Most importantly, the first test of our new family dynamic proved successful. When another major opportunity arose, we approached it collaboratively, each bringing our strengths to the table without the old tensions and suspicions. One evening, as Elena and I were having dinner at our favorite restaurant, she asked the question that had been lingering, "Do you regret your response to your father's text?" Just saying, understood, instead of fighting back immediately. I thought about it carefully. No. It was the right move, though I didn't fully realize why at the time. It gave me space to think strategically instead of emotionally. And ironically, it left the door open for reconciliation. She smiled. Your calculated restraint paid off. Not just restraint, I corrected her. Patience. Mom always said the Steinberg men tend to react too quickly. She would have been proud that I finally learned that lesson. The next day I received a text from my father, dinner tonight, just the two of us. It was time for the most important reconciliation of all. 6 months after that fateful text message that could have destroyed everything, Steinberg Enterprises was thriving like never before. Our green conversion strategy had attracted premium clients to our facilities, increasing revenue by 28%. The Sterling partnership had given us access to expansion capital without diluting family control. And EcoFlow Solutions, my personal investment that had caused so much turmoil, was now integrated across our entire portfolio, creating a unique value proposition that competitors couldn't match. But the true transformation wasn't on our balance sheet. It was in the fundamental shift in how our family operated, both as business partners and as, well, a family. Dad and I had slowly rebuilt our relationship during our weekly private dinners. The first few were stilted, careful conversations limited mostly to business matters. But gradually we rediscovered the easy rapport we'd once shared. I keep thinking about your mother, he said during one such dinner. How she would have handled all of this better than we did. Maybe, I admitted with a small smile. But she also had her blind spots. She never fully embraced change until it was unavoidable. You saw further ahead than she would have. That acknowledgement meant more to me than he could know. Sarah and I had established a new professional dynamic built on clearly defined responsibilities and regular, transparent communication. The personal relationship remained more complicated. Some wounds heal slowly, especially between siblings. But we were making progress, finding our way back to something resembling trust. One unexpected outcome was Sarah's newfound humility. Being manipulated by Reynolds had shaken her confidence, but in a constructive way. She had begun seeking out mentorship from Harold and other industry veterans, acknowledging that charisma alone wasn't enough to lead effectively. "I've been thinking about what happened with Titan," she told me during a rare moment of vulnerability. "How easily I fell for their manipulation. They're professionals at corporate sabotage," I reminded her. "You weren't the first to be deceived." "But I should have trusted my brother more than a competitor," she replied simply. It was as close to a full apology as Sarah could manage, and I accepted it for what it was. The Riverside facility, once nearly our downfall, was completed on schedule and fully leased before construction even finished. Its innovative, eco-friendly features, including the EcoFlow system, had made it the most sought-after manufacturing space in the region. Elena and I moved into a new apartment closer to the office, a tacit acknowledgement that my exile was truly over. More significantly, I had finally proposed after 3 years together, and she had accepted. The wedding was set for spring. "You know," she teased as we discussed the guest list, "your family drama would make a hell of a story someday." "Who would believe it?" I laughed. "The part where your investment made you $25 million while saving the family business is a nice touch," she pointed out. The money was never the point, I reflected. It was about being vindicated, about proving my vision was right all along. "And about family," Elena added softly. "Despite everything, you chose them when you could have walked away." She was right. Of course, for all the business success and financial gain, the most valuable outcome was the hard-won wisdom about family dynamics, trust, and the power of strategic patience. One afternoon my father called me into his office. On his desk was a small wooden box I recognized immediately. It had belonged to my grandmother, then my mother. "I think it's time for you to have this," he said, pushing it toward me. Inside was my grandmother's brooch, a family heirloom passed down to the keeper of the Steinberg legacy. "Dad," I began, surprised. "This should go to Sarah as CEO." He shook his head. "Your grandmother didn't give it to the person with the title. She gave it to the person with the vision. Your mother continued that tradition. Now I am." As I held the brooch, feeling its weight in history, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. From that devastating text message, "We no longer trust you," to this profound gesture of restored faith. "I made a terrible mistake in doubting you," Dad said quietly. "The way you handled it, with dignity and strategic thinking instead of emotional reaction, showed me exactly why you deserve this." My one-word response, I mused. "Understood." "The most powerful word you could have chosen," he agreed. It gave us all space to find our way back to the truth. Later that week, our family gathered for dinner at the estate, something that had once been routine but now felt precious. As we shared stories and plans for the future, I observed the subtle changes in all of us. Dad, more willing to express his feelings directly. Sarah, more thoughtful and less defensive. Myself, more patient and perhaps a bit wiser. We had all been changed by the crucible of betrayal and reconciliation. The family business was stronger for it, but more importantly, so was the family itself. As I drove home that night, I reflected on the lessons of the past 6 months. Trust, once broken, is never quite the same when rebuilt. But perhaps the new structure, constructed with greater awareness and intention, can be even stronger than what existed before.